Hi, I'm Abba Shapiro, and this week we're going to look at recovering lost detail and information in your images. Now, there are times when you can't always control the light. In this case, I didn't have a strobe or a fill flash to properly light the model while exposing the background properly. So I split the difference. Now, the key here is to make sure you shoot in the RAW format on your camera, not the JPEG format. The RAW format has so much more information that you can actually recover your highlights and recover information lost in the shadows so easily with Luminar, taking what appears to be an unusable image and getting a really nice image out of it. Now, this was our starting point. This is what came out of the camera, and this is where we're going to go with this image. As you can see, there's a lot of detail that I'm able to pull out, and we're going to step through what you need to know to be able to take that first image and get this image. As always, when you want to know when we post new tips and tutorials, subscribe to our channel by clicking on the subscribe button, and if you like this video, please hit the like button. Now let's go ahead and reset this image back to its default state and process it. I have what I've created, my own personal quick and awesome modified workspace. And all I've done is I've taken the original quick and awesome workspace, which is like this, and I've added a couple things that I use frequently. I've added the ability for raw develop. I've added the tone function. As you can see, I still have the accent AI, AI sky enhancer, saturation, vibrance, and clarity, and I've also added a vignette. These are the filters that I use most frequently. And to make sure that I always have them right at hand, once I set this up, all I did was go up here under the drop-down menu for Workspaces, and I saved it as a new workspace, and I set it as my default. So every time I open an image, those will be my default filters, and I'm ready to start editing. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to recover my highlights, and I want to open up my shadows. And this is where the raw develop module comes into play. I'm going to go ahead and grab the highlight slider and move it to the left, and this is going to start recovering some of those blown out highlights. So as you can see, there was still a lot of information that I could not see in this image, and I can recover that. Now I want to open up the shadows. I want to make sure that I can see some more detail in the rocks. I want to bring out the detail into this red dress and also into her face. So in this case, I'm going to grab the shadow slider and move that to the right, and this will open up my shadows. Now I'm not going to worry too much about the fact that the image is starting to look a little bit washed out, because then I can go ahead and use the contrast slider and just add a little more contrast into the image. And I'm going to add a little bit of clarity just to sharpen things up. So very quickly, we've taken an image that really looks washed out without a lot of detail in the shadows, and with just a few sliders, brought out a lot more information. Let's take a quick look at the before and the after. Now, this is a nice image, but I'm going to go ahead and leverage some of the other filters available to me in Luminar. The next slider I'm going to use is the accent AI filter. And this is great because it's going to just equalize my image. And just with one slider, I'm able to really bring out a lot of the pop in this image. If you notice that it looks a lot less washed out, the tones are really nice, and I can control that with the accent AI slider. I'm ready to make my clouds look a little bit better, my sky look a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and move the AI sky enhancer filter just a little bit to the right, because the sky's already pretty good. Now I do want to point out, and some of you may have noticed this already, I have a couple of spots here. The nature of shooting at the beach sometimes is you get ocean spray on your lens. Sometimes you might even get sensor dust if you change the lens while you're outside. And by working on this image, this is a lot more apparent, and I'm going to fix this at the very end. I'm going to go ahead and use my clone and stamp tool to remove those, but I'm not going to be distracted by those while I'm trying to edit my image. One thing I always like to do with almost every one of my images is bring down the saturation and bring up the vibrance, and what this does is equalize the colors. By bringing down the saturation, I've really brought down the real bright red part of the dress and a little bit of the over blue in the image, but then vibrance goes ahead and brings up the more muted colors in the image, giving me a much more balanced look. As we continue down, I like to add just a hint of clarity and I'm going to go ahead and add a vignette. What I like most about the vignette is that I can apply it, position it very easily over my subject. So I really want the vignette to be centered over her. And then I use the inner light to actually help me relight this image. Let's again take a look at the before and the after. And we're getting a lot closer. So I considered this a neutralized image, an image that I want to really start working on. I've got it nice and balanced, and I'm ready to add some more creativity to it. I want to add a lot more detail. I want to add a lot more pop. So I take what I have here, and now I'm going to add an adjustment layer so I can start playing with some looks, as well as adding some other filters to make this image look exactly how I remembered it when I shot it. To add an adjustment layer, click on the plus sign to the right of the word layers. And now if I want to try some looks, I can open up my looks collections by clicking on the center upper part of the toolbar. Now my looks are active, and the look that I want to add to this is located in the essentials collection all the way to the right, and it's called Super Sharp. And immediately what it does is it brings out a lot of detail in the dress and in the rocks, and I'm ready to start working with this image. But I want to goose up my detail a little bit more. So I'm going to go down to the detail enhancer section and just move that to the right, and it's going to add a lot more detail to the rocks. And I'm going to use both small and medium to bring in that detail over here in the rocks and to bring in the detail in the red dress and these rocks over here to the left. Next, we'll move the large detail enhancer slider to the left, and that's going to help soften up the clouds. Now this is where masking comes into play, especially the ability to be able to create a mask on an individual filter. To create a mask, you can see there's a small brush to the right of the words detail enhancer. Click on the word brush, and now you have the option to either paint in your details or erase the details. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. You can do this with this drop down here and control the size, or use the left and right brackets. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the paint option, and I'm going to simply draw over or paint over the areas where I want a little more detail to make this pop. And I'll use the left and right bracket keys to quickly change the size of my brush, and I want to paint in that detail specifically on the rocks and specifically on the dress. I'll try to avoid her skin, and if I do overshoot, I can always erase that by simply switching to the erase option here. And if I want to see exactly where I've painted things in, I'll move my cursor over to the left and click on this little eyeball, and that'll actually show me the areas that I've painted in to be sharper. And as you see, I need to switch over to here and paint into this rock. And if we turn off the red overlay, and then we toggle this one filter on and off, you can see how I just brought detail in just over here into the rock and into the dress. So I really like where this is going. And again, this has accentuated some of those spots that I got on my lens, but we're going to fix that at the very end with the clone and stamp tool. Now that I really see where my picture is going, I'm going to open up the crop tool. Not necessarily crop the image, but I want to straighten my horizon, and that's very easy to do with the crop tool. I'll click on Tools, drop down, keyboard shortcut is the C key, and then I have the option here to adjust the angle. And I'll just move that slightly just until I see that that horizon kind of lines up over here with these lines. When I'm happy with the crop, I'll click on the Done key. I like where this is going, but I want to change a few things. I think the foreground's a little bit too bright. It's drawing our eyes' attention to that area, and I really want the balance to be between her, the red dress, and this rock. So I want to lower the brightness here, and we can do that by adding an adjustable gradient, which is located towards the very bottom of your filters catalog under Utility. When you add an adjustable gradient, you can set its orientation. So I'm going to click on Set Orientation, and when I hover my cursor over the image, I have the ability to move that up and down, but I also have the ability to rotate that. So I'm going to position this just so that it's covering the ground. And I have a nice soft threshold here, but maybe I'll make it a little bit tighter and position that a little bit higher. Now I can move over to the filter, turn off Set Orientation, switch over to adjust the bottom, and I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit in the foreground. If I wanted to, I can brighten the background by clicking on the top and add a little bit more luminance to that. And when you add luminance to an image, the saturation appears to be less. The darker you make an image, the more saturated it appears. The lighter you make an image, the less saturated it appears. So I'm going to add a little bit of vibrance back into the top. And I also want to give this a little more of a sunset feel. So at the bottom, I'm going to add it. I want to have a little bit more of a sunset feel. So on the bottom part of my adjustable gradient, let's add a little bit of warmth. And let's try a little bit of contrast. That adds a real nice punch to the foreground. It's always good when you're editing an image to toggle back and forth between the original state and your current state to see where you've come from. So this was our original image, pretty blown out, not so fun. And this is where we are now. If I want to see just the effect of the adjustable gradient on my image, I can toggle off that filter with the small eyeball to the right of the name of the filter. So this is with the adjustable gradient, and this is without. So it's subtle, but it's really added a lot to this image. As I indicated earlier, I do want to add a little bit more of that golden hour. And we shot this pretty much 2 or 3 hours before golden hour. We didn't have the opportunity to shoot at golden hour, but we can use one of our creative filters. And underneath creative, there is a golden hour filter. I'll select it to add it to my filters list and just add a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. And this is just giving me that nice golden feel. So I'm looking at this image. I really like the way it's working. I think the red in the dress is a little too prominent, and I can control that with the hue, saturation, and luminance filter. This is one of those filters that I truly love, and I talk about it all the time, and I think it's one that everybody should put into their repertoire, into their bag of tricks when they're developing an image. You will find it under the professional area of your filters catalog. Click on HSL. I can work with specific colors within my image. So if I think the red is too saturated, I can simply bring down just the red tones of this image. And I can also control the luminance of the red in this image. And if you notice, I can make it darker or brighter. So I'm going to just bring it out to where it really just starts to pop, but it's not distracting. I think we're really close to being finished with this image. There's only a few more things I want to do. I think her face is a little bit dark. I want to bring that out a little bit. And again, under the professional area of the filters catalog, there's something called dodge and burn. The dodge and burn allows you to basically lighten or darken areas of your image. So I want to lighten her face. So with dodge and burn selected, I'm going to click on Start Painting. And I can either choose to lighten or darken. I want to lighten her face. I want to zoom in here. So I'm going to simply hit Control 1, Command 1, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. The space bar lets me grab this image and move it around. And I can even scroll in a little bit closer just to make sure I can be quite precise. And if I wanted to, I can make my brush a little bit smaller. And I just want to lighten this. Now the default is 50% opacity. I like to bring that down to about 20 or 30% because it allows me more nuance in painting in my lightening or the darkening of an area. Since I have it set to lighten, I can simply create a couple of strokes over her face. And as you can see, it gets a little bit lighter. And I just want to do this very subtly, just enough to bring up the luminance in her face and maybe a little bit in her arms, just because she was kind of in silhouette in the original image. It's always good to zoom back out to see the entire image, to see if you've brightened something properly or not. And I think that's pretty good. We're going to go with that. I'm going to click on the Start Painting again to turn it off. This is the before, this is the after. It's very subtle, and I probably would go in with a little more detail and try to bring up the forehead, but for the time being, I think we're pretty close. I really like how this image is coming along. Now, one thing is still bothering me, and that this is still a little bit brighter on the right side where the rock is and the background is, and it's drawing my eye away from the center of attention, which should be the model. So I'm going to add one more filter. I'm going to add a top and bottom lighting filter. And just like we did with the adjustable gradient, I can set its orientation and rotate it that instead of going top and bottom, I'm actually using left and right. And I'm going to simply move that over here. And now when I turn off the set orientation and start playing with the sliders, I'm going to take the bottom, which is now on the right side, and just bring that slider a little bit to the left, which will darken that part of the image. And just that very subtle change, as you can see, if I toggle this one filter on and off, really changes the focus of my view. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to fix those darn spots of water that were on my lens. So we'll choose Tools, Clone and Stamp. I will zoom in just using the scroll wheel on my mouse, the space bar to reposition the image, and now I can choose the area that I want to clone from. I do that by holding down the Alt key or the Option key, and then can paint over that new area. Nice and patiently paint out those spots, choosing other areas of my image just to smooth it out. Let's zoom all the way back, Command 0. I've really got a dramatically improved image from what we had. And let's take a look at the before. That was the image that came out of the camera, and this is the image that I was able to recover a lot of the details and information that was recorded when I took the picture. Shooting RAW versus shooting JPEG captures so much more information. It allows you to recover nuance and detail that you never thought were there. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and click on like. If you want to be notified when we have new tips and tutorials on our website, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And of course, if you have any questions, ask them in the comments section below. I'm Abba Shapiro, and for the entire Luminar team, thank you for watching.